Standing at the back of the lavish cathedral, I watched my ex-husband slide a $500,000 diamond ring onto the finger of the mistress who ruined my life. While I drowned in debt, Marcus smirked, believing I had come to beg for pity. He did not know the guest in the front row held a secret that would destroy this wedding and send him to prison forever. Today was not his celebration, but my judgment day. To understand why, we have to go back to where it all started 3 months ago. My name is Elena Vance. I stood on the cracked pavement of the busy street, craning my neck to look up at the Omnitech headquarters. The glass structure reflected the cold, gray sky of the city, looking impenetrable and arrogant. I used to own 40% of that building. I used to walk through those revolving doors as a co-founder, greeted with smiles and respect. Now, the security guards had a photo of my face taped behind the desk with a strict order to deny entry. The wind bit through my thin coat, a harsh reminder that I was now an outsider looking in at the empire I helped build with my own blood and sweat. The memory of the courtroom from 3 months ago still tasted like ash in my mouth. Marcus had sat there, cool and composed in his bespoke suit, while his team of lawyers dissected my life. They painted me as incompetent, unstable, and a burden to the company's growth. Your Honor, his lead attorney had said, smooth as oil. Mrs. Vance has clearly lost her grasp on reality due to stress. We are doing her a kindness. It was a masterclass in manipulation. When the gavel fell, I was not just divorced, I was destitute. Marcus had funneled our liquid assets into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, leaving behind nothing but a paper trail of debts. Specifically, a tax liability of $450,000 that he had somehow legally attached to my Social Security number. I turned away from the tower and walked toward the subway entrance. I no longer had a driver. I no longer had the penthouse on the Upper East Side with the view of Central Park. Home was now a 300-square-foot studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens wailed all night long. The radiator rattled, the faucet leaked, and the smell of stale cabbage from the hallway never faded. It was a far cry from the silk sheets and climate-controlled wine cellar I had curated for us. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from social media. Against my better judgment, I looked at the screen. It was Chloe. She had posted a new photo 10 minutes ago. She was holding a glass of vintage champagne, her wrist adorned with a bracelet I recognized immediately because I had designed it for our 10th anniversary. The caption read, "Living the dream with my love. True luxury is having a man who spoils you." She was living my life, spending my money, and flaunting it to the world while I counted change to buy instant noodles. When I got back to my cramped apartment, I saw the mail on the floor. Among the bills and final notices lay a thick, cream-colored envelope. I tore it open. It was a wedding invitation. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, Marcus Sterling and Chloe Miller. On the back, in Marcus's distinctive handwriting, was a note. "Elena, I thought you should come. It might be good for you to see what a happy marriage actually looks like." Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me. I grabbed the invitation and threw it across the room. It landed on a pile of cardboard boxes that Marcus had shipped to me last week. He called it returning my personal effects, but it was mostly garbage he wanted to clear out of the penthouse. I kicked the nearest box, my frustration boiling over. The cardboard tore and the contents spilled out. Old sweaters, broken picture frames, and something distinctively metallic clattered onto the cheap linoleum floor. I bent down. It was a tablet. The screen was shattered in a spiderweb pattern. I recognized it. Marcus had claimed he lost this device 2 years ago during a business trip to Chicago. I picked it up. The casing was bent, but the charging port looked intact. Driven by a strange instinct, I plugged it into my charger. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then, the screen flickered. It was dim and glitchy, but it was alive. I bypassed the lock screen. He never changed his passcode from his birthday. A notification popped up immediately. Backup incomplete. Restore files, I pressed. Yes, files began to populate the screen. I opened the calendar app first. It was not the shared calendar we used to keep. This one was full of meetings at odd hours. Midnight, Pier 42, 3 in the morning, the warehouse district. Then I saw a folder labeled Project Obsidian. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. It was not a product launch. It was a ledger. I scrolled through pages of complex financial structures, shell companies in Panama, fake invoices for consulting fees. It was a massive money laundering operation involving millions of dollars, but what made the room spin was what I found on the final page of a loan document for a high-risk venture capital fund. There was a signature at the bottom. It was not Marcus's signature. It was mine, or rather, a perfect forgery of mine. Oh my God, I whispered to the empty room, my hand trembling as I held the device. He didn't just steal from me. He set me up. I sat back against the cold wall, clutching the broken tablet to my chest. I was not just a discarded wife. I was the designated fall guy for a federal crime. Marcus kept this tablet not because he forgot it, but because it contained the insurance policy he needed to send me to prison if the authorities ever got close. I waited for the annual charity gala, knowing Marcus would be there to preen for the cameras. The moment he stepped onto the red carpet, I lunged forward from the crowd of onlookers. I did not have a plan, only the burning weight of the tablet in my bag and a desperate need for the world to see his true face. "Marcus," I screamed, pushing past a velvet rope. "Tell them about Obsidian. Tell them what you made me sign." He did not even flinch. He just looked at me with a mixture of pity and amusement, adjusting his silk tie. Before I could take another step, 2 massive security guards grabbed me by the arms. The grip was bruising. "Get this woman out of here," Marcus said calmly, loud enough for the reporters to hear. "She is off her medication again." I was dragged to the curb and thrown onto the wet asphalt like a bag of trash. As I sat there, humiliated, my phone rang. It was him. "Elena." His voice oozed through the speaker, smooth and terrifyingly patronizing. "You are embarrassing yourself. You sound paranoid. I think it is time you went back to see Dr. Evans. You know, I spoke to him yesterday. He agrees that your files show a severe decline in mental stability. It would be a shame if those records were made public to explain your outbursts." My blood ran cold. Dr. Evans was my therapist during the divorce, the one who had prescribed me heavy sedatives that made me sleep through court dates. I realized then that Marcus had bought him long ago. You monster," I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "You took everything. I am trying to help you." "Elena," he lied, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Stop fighting. You will never win." By the next morning, the narrative was set. I turned on the small television in my apartment to see Chloe giving an interview. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, looking perfectly fragile. "It is just so scary." Chloe sobbed on screen. "Elena has been stalking us. She sends threats. Marcus and I just want to live in peace. But she is obsessed. We are praying for her mental health." The fallout was immediate. An hour later, my boss at the small graphic design firm I had managed to join called me into his office. He refused to look me in the eye. "We have to let you go. Elena," he said, sliding a check across the desk. "Omnitech's legal team contacted us. They hinted that keeping you on staff would be a liability for our upcoming contracts. We cannot afford the risk." I walked out of the building with my cardboard box, numb. I went to the grocery store to buy a bottle of water, my throat parched from holding back screams. When I swiped my debit card, the machine beeped a harsh error tone. "Declined." I tried again. "Declined." I called the bank immediately. "I am sorry. Mrs. Vance," the teller said robotically. "Your accounts have been frozen due to suspicious activity and a flag for potential fraud. You will need to come into the branch to resolve this. but the investigation could take up to 60 days. 60 days! I had $12 in my pocket. Marcus was not just defeating me, he was erasing me. He was stripping away every layer of my dignity until I was nothing but the crazy ex-wife he painted me to be. I sat in my car, the engine idling rough, and felt the walls closing in. There was no way out. He owned the lawyers, the banks, the doctors, and the narrative. In that suffocating darkness, a single face floated into my mind. Grandpa Silas. Marcus had always hated him. Whenever we visited the nursing home, Marcus would wrinkle his nose at the smell of antiseptic and old age. Why do we bother visiting that old vegetable Marcus used to sneer on the drive home? He is just a useless drain on resources, a burden to society. You should just cut him loose. I had defended him then, but lately, I had been too ashamed to visit. I did not want him to see me like this. But now, I had nowhere else to go. I was not going there to ask for help. What could a 90-year-old man in a state-subsidized facility do against a billionaire tyrant? No. I was going there to say goodbye. I put the car in gear and drove toward the outskirts of the city. The nursing home was a bleak, single-story building named Sunnyvale, a cruel joke of a name for a place where people went to be forgotten. I parked my rusted sedan between a dumpster and a delivery van. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hollow, my hair unwashed. I looked exactly like the failure Marcus said I was. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to drive off a bridge, and stepped out to see the only family I had left one last time. The smell of boiled cabbage and antiseptic hit me as I walked down the linoleum hallway of Sunnyvale Nursing Home to room 304. I pushed the door open, expecting to find Grandpa Silas staring blankly at the television, perhaps drooling slightly as he often did these past few years. Instead, I froze in the doorway. Silas was sitting upright in his wheelchair by the window, playing chess against himself. But it was his posture that stopped me cold. His back was rigid, his shoulders squared. When he turned to look at me, the cloudy, vacant expression I had known for a decade was gone. In its place was a gaze of predatory clarity. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and terrifyingly alert. I crumbled. The shock of seeing him like this, mixed with the exhaustion of the last few days, was too much. I collapsed onto the edge of his thin, lumpy mattress and let it all pour out. Grandpa, they took everything. I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. Marcus. He set me up. He forged my signature. I have debts I can never pay, and he is going to put me in jail. I have nowhere left to go. I told him about the frozen accounts, the public humiliation, and the tablet I had found. I confessed my plan to give up, to just let the darkness take me because fighting seemed impossible. I waited for him to pat my hand with a trembling grip, to offer some confused, senile comfort. He did not move. The only sound in the room was the click of a chess piece as he captured his own queen. Elena. His voice was not the rasp of an old man, but a deep, commanding baritone that vibrated in the small room. Look at me. I lifted my head, wiping my eyes. Do you want him to apologize? Silas asked, his voice steady as steel. Or do you want him to disappear? I blinked, confused. What? What are you talking about? Without breaking eye contact. Silas reached under his mattress. I expected him to pull out a stash of hidden snacks or maybe an old photo album. Instead, he withdrew a heavy matte black device. It was a satellite phone, rugged and unmistakably military grade. Grandpa, I whispered, my heart pounding for a different reason now. I was never a simple accountant. Elena, he said, his fingers dancing over the keypad with practiced speed. For 40 years, I commanded a Black Ops intelligence unit specializing in dismantling transnational economic criminals. I retired into obscurity to keep my enemies from finding you. I played the part of the senile old fool to keep us off the radar." He paused, looking at the device as it established a secure uplink. "But Marcus, that arrogant boy, broke the only rule that matters in my world," Silas growled, a dangerous light flaring in his eyes. He touched my family. He brought the phone to his ear. "Code red." He spoke into the receiver, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Activate Ghost Team. Target Sterling. Authorization Alpha 9 Zulu." I sat there, stunned into silence. This was not the man who needed help cutting his meat at Thanksgiving. This was a stranger wearing my grandfather's face. "Pack your things." "Elena," he said, tucking the phone into his cardigan pocket. "We are leaving. Leaving." To where I stammered. "To war," he replied simply. Exactly 30 minutes later, the gravel outside the nursing home crunched under heavy tires. I looked out the window to see two sleek, armored black SUVs screech to a halt. 4 men in dark suits stepped out. They moved with lethal precision, ignoring the nursing home staff who stared with open mouths. They marched into the room and stopped before Silas's wheelchair. Then, in perfect unison, they snapped to attention and saluted. "Colonel," the lead man said, "the package is ready for transport." I was ushered into the back of the lead SUV, my head spinning. We sped away from the nursing home, weaving through traffic until we reached the industrial district near the docks. The car pulled into a derelict warehouse that looked abandoned, but as we approached the back wall, a hidden hydraulic mechanism activated. The floor lowered, revealing a ramp that led deep underground. We descended into a bunker that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Walls of monitors displayed global financial data, satellite feeds, and facial recognition scans. It was a high-tech fortress hidden beneath the city's decay. Silas wheeled himself toward the main console, the monitors reflecting in his glasses. He looked at a picture of Marcus on the main screen. "Marcus thinks he is a shark because he ate a few minnows in the corporate world," Silas said, his voice low and terrifying. "But he does not know he is swimming in the tank of a sea monster." The bunker hummed with the quiet, intense energy of a war room. I stood in the center of the command hub, surrounded by 3 people who looked like they could topple governments before breakfast. Silas introduced them briefly. There was Jax, a hacker with neon-dyed hair and fingers that moved across 3 keyboards simultaneously. Beside him stood Renee, a forensic accountant and disbarred lawyer who knew every loophole in the international banking system. Finally, there was Kenta, a surveillance expert who spoke in monosyllables and was currently dismantling a drone in the corner. "We are in," Jax announced, his voice echoing slightly in the concrete room. The firewall was tough, but Marcus has a bad habit of reusing passwords from his college days. On the massive main screen, a complex web of lines and nodes appeared. It was a visualization of Marcus's financial empire. To the public, it looked like a clean corporate ladder. Here, it looked like a cancerous growth. Dozens of shell companies flickered into existence on the map. "It is a classic layering scheme," Renee observed, crossing her arms. "He moves money from Omnitech to a shell in the Virgin Islands, then to a consulting firm in Delaware, and finally back to his private accounts." "But we need the key to prove intent," Silas said from his wheelchair. "Elena, give them the tablet." I handed the cracked device to Jax. He plugged it into a terrifyingly large server rack. Within seconds, the screen turned red. The data from the tablet acted as a skeleton key, unlocking encrypted files that the initial scan had missed. "Got it." Jax grinned. "And look at who is holding the bag. It is not just Marcus." He pulled up a profile. It was Chloe. "She is not just the trophy wife." Jax laughed dryly. "She is the signatory on 5 different laundering accounts. Marcus is smart. He put the riskiest assets in her name so that if the feds come knocking, she takes the fall." "It gets worse," Renee interrupted, Zooming in on a specific transaction log, look at the source of these funds. This is not corporate profit. This is the employee pension fund. I gasped. He is stealing from his own workers. He is draining their retirement savings to speculate on unregulated cryptocurrency. Renee confirmed, her face grim. If the market crashes, 3,000 people lose their life savings. And look here, Elena. These are the loan documents from 5 years ago. She projected a document onto the wall. It was a high-risk loan for $10 million. At the bottom was my signature, shaky but distinct. It is a digital forgery, Jax said. A good one, but I can prove the timestamp on the signature does not match the metadata of the document creation. He pasted your signature from a birthday card you sent him. My blood boiled. I wanted to storm into his office and scream the truth. I turned to Silas. We have enough to arrest him now. I said, call the FBI. No, Silas said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. If we arrest him now, his lawyers will drag this out for 10 years. He will get a plea deal. He will keep half the money. We do not just want justice, Elena. We want total annihilation. He wheeled himself closer to the map. We are going to use the boiling frog strategy, Silas explained. We let him feel safe. We let him feel victorious. We let the water get warm slowly so he does not jump out until it is boiling. What do I need to do? I asked. Kenta stepped forward, holding a tiny device that looked like a button. You are going to wear a wire, Kenta said. But not just any wire. This transmits high-fidelity audio directly to our servers in real time. It is undetectable by standard sweeps. You need to go to him, Silas commanded. Play the role he expects. Be the broken, defeated ex-wife. Beg for his forgiveness. Feed his ego until he gets careless. For the next 4 hours, the team drilled me. Kenta taught me how to control my breathing so my pulse would not show on my neck when I lied. Renee coached me on exactly what financial terms to mention to trigger a confession without sounding suspicious. He will try to humiliate you, Silas warned. He will try to break you. Can you handle it? I thought about the pension fund. I thought about the forgery. I thought of Chloe wearing my jewelry. I can handle it, I said. Good. Silas nodded. Because the target is not his office. The target is the wedding. That is where he will be surrounded by the very people whose opinion matters most to him. We are going to strip him naked in front of the world. I stood in the lobby of the Omnitech building, deliberately hunched over. I wore a fraying gray cardigan and no makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes tell a story of defeat. To the receptionist, I looked like a woman who had lost everything. To the tiny microphone taped beneath my collar, I was a weapon. Mr. Sterling will see you now, the receptionist said, her nose wrinkling slightly as she looked at my shoes. He says he has 5 minutes for charity. I walked into the executive suite that I had designed. Marcus sat behind the massive mahogany desk, looking like a king on his throne. He did not even stand up. Elena, he smirked, leaning back in his leather chair. I must say, poverty does not suit you. You look terrible. I am desperate. Marcus, I stammered, making sure my voice trembled just enough to feed his ego. The collectors. They are calling me every hour. That tax debt. I cannot pay $450,000. Please, it is ruining me. Marcus laughed, a cold, sharp sound. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just inches from me. That is the point. Elena, he whispered, his arrogance making him careless. You think that debt landed on you by accident. I moved the assets. I shifted the liabilities. I spent months structuring it so you would be the one drowning while I sailed away. It is not a mistake. It is a masterstroke. I kept my head down to hide the satisfaction in my eyes. Got you, I thought. But why I sniffed, looking up at him with wide, teary eyes. We were partners. We were never partners. He sneered. You were a stepping stone. And now, I am about to ascend. This wedding on Saturday. It is not just a party. It is my coronation. The merger will be announced right after the vows. I will be the most powerful man in the city. He walked back to his desk and pulled a document from a drawer. I am a generous god, though, he said, sliding the paper toward me. Sign this. It is a new non-disclosure agreement. It states you will never speak to the press, never claim any rights to Omnitech, and never come within 100 yards of me or Chloe. In exchange, I will give you a monthly allowance of $2,000. $2,000. It was an insult. It was barely enough to pay rent in this city, but I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy silver pen Silas had given me. I have no choice, I whispered. I leaned over the desk to sign. As I pretended to struggle with the ink flow, I clicked the top of the pen twice. The high-resolution camera lens hidden in the clip snapped a rapid series of photos of the documents scattered on his desk. Confidential merger memos, bank routing numbers, passwords scrawled on sticky notes. Suddenly, the door burst open. Chloe sashayed in, holding a steaming latte. She stopped when she saw me, her face twisting into a mask of disgust. "What is she doing here?" Chloe shrieked. "Marcus, you promised me she was gone. She is just signing away her rights." "Darling," Marcus soothed her. "She was just leaving." Chloe walked up to me, looking me up and down. "You look like a homeless person." She laughed. "It is pathetic." Then, with a motion that was clearly deliberate, she tilted her hand. The hot latte splashed all over my chest, soaking into the gray cardigan and burning my skin. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with fake innocence. My hand slipped, though, honestly, that sweater needed to be washed anyway. I stood there, the hot liquid dripping down my front. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to slap her. I wanted to grab her by her expensive hair extensions and drag her across the room. But I froze. I looked her dead in the eye. For a split second, I let the mask slip. My eyes went cold. Dead. And dangerous. Chloe flinched. She took a step back, looking suddenly unsure. "Get out," Marcus barked, breaking the tension. "And listen to me, Elena. If I see your face at my wedding, I will have you arrested for harassment before you can take a breath. Do not test me." I understand," I mumbled, reverting to the scared ex-wife. "I won't come. I promise." I turned and walked out of the office, the sound of their laughter following me down the hall. I took the elevator down to the lobby, ignoring the stares of the security guards as coffee dripped onto the marble floor. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the cold, fresh air. I walked around to the corner to a quiet alleyway and pulled a tissue from my pocket to dab at the stain. Then, I touched the microphone under my collar. "Did you get it?" I asked, my voice steady and calm. Jax's voice crackled in my ear, crisp and clear, loud and clear. "The confession is recorded, and the photos from the pen are already decrypting. We have the routing numbers. And the voice print I asked. We have enough of his voice samples to synthesize anything," Jax replied. "Marcus just authorized his own destruction." I smiled, dropping the coffee-stained tissue into a trash can. "Good," I said. "Let's go home." Despite the digital confession we had secured, Silas was not satisfied. He sat in the command center, his fingers drumming a rhythmic beat on the armrest of his wheelchair. "Digital files can be challenged in court," Silas stated, his voice grim. "Lawyers will claim they are deepfakes or altered recordings. To bury Marcus Sterling properly, we need the physical ledger, the black book. We knew exactly where it was. It was sitting in a titanium floor safe in the master bedroom of the villa I used to call home, but breaking into a fortress guarded by private security required an inside man, or in this case, a broken woman. Kenta pulled up a live feed of Marcus's personal assistant, Sarah. She was sitting in her car in the company parking lot, sobbing into the steering wheel. Our surveillance showed that Marcus had screamed at her for 20 minutes earlier that day because his coffee was lukewarm, threatening to fire her and blacklist her from every agency in the city. I waited for her outside her apartment complex that evening. When she saw me, she dropped her grocery bags, her eyes wide with panic. "Elena," she whispered, looking over her shoulder. You shouldn't be here. If he sees us." "He won't," I said softly, stepping out of the shadows. "I know what he does. Sarah, I know he threatens you. I know he makes you feel small so he can control you." Sarah started to tremble. "He told me. He said if I quit, he would sue me for breach of contract. He said I would never work again." "He is lying," I told her, placing a hand on her shaking shoulder. "I can make him stop. But I need your help. I do not have money to give you." "Sarah, but I can promise you protection, real protection, the kind that makes men like Marcus have nightmares." She looked at me, searching for the lie, but found only resolve. "Finally." She reached into her purse and pulled out a key card. "The alarm code is 7419, she stammered, tears spilling over. "And the cameras. There is a blind spot near the pool house. That night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the operation began. I sat in the bunker, my eyes glued to the monitors. Silas's ghost team moved like shadows. They did not just break in, they flowed through the property. Thanks to Sarah's intel, they bypassed the perimeter sensors and disabled the internal motion detectors before a single alarm could trip. Team Alpha is in position." The voice of the lead operative crackled over the comms. "Approaching the target." I watched on the screen as they drilled into the safe using a silent laser cutter. It took them less than 4 minutes. When the heavy door swung open, the operative reached in and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. "Jackpot." Jax cheered from his computer station. "That is the ledger. Every bribe to the zoning board, every payoff to the fire inspector. It is all there in his handwriting." But there was something else in the safe. The operative pulled out a small digital camera. He scrolled through the recent files and held it up to his body cam so we could see. I gasped. The images were time-stamped from just 2 days ago. They showed Marcus in a very compromising position, entangled in the sheets of a hotel bed. But the woman was not Chloe. "Is that—" I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. "That is Jessica, Chloe's maid of honor." The room went silent. Marcus was cheating on his mistress-turned-fiancé with her best friend, mere days before the wedding. "Do we leak it now?" Renee asked, her hand hovering over the keyboard. Silas chuckled, a dark, low sound that rumbled in his chest. "No," he commanded. "The financial crimes will send him to prison. But this will destroy his soul. Save it. We will serve this as dessert." While the extraction team vanished into the night as silently as they had arrived, Jax went to work on the wedding venue's server. He bypassed the firewall of the event planning company with insulting ease. "I am in the lighting system, the audio feed, and the main projector," Jax announced, his fingers flying. "I have replaced the sentimental slideshow with a new playlist. I call it the Sterling Exposure." I sat back in my chair, watching the sun begin to rise on the monitors. The evidence was secured, the trap was primed. The invitees were sleeping, unaware that they were about to witness a massacre disguised as a marriage. "Go get some sleep." "Elena," Silas said gently, "you have a big day tomorrow. You need to look your best when you walk into that church." I nodded, but I knew I would not sleep. I was too busy imagining the look on Marcus's face when his perfect world came crashing down. The sun beat down on Sterling Manor, a sprawling estate that Marcus had purchased just 6 months ago with funds he claimed did not exist during our divorce settlement. The place was a grotesque monument to new money. White peacocks roamed the manicured lawns. and a string quartet played soft classical music near a fountain filled with champagne. It was not a wedding. It was a theatrical production designed to convince the world that Marcus Sterling was a man of unlimited wealth and impeccable taste. The guest list was a parade of the city's elite. I recognized senators who had voted for tax breaks that benefited Omnitech, rival CEOs Marcus was trying to merge with, and socialites who used to drink my wine while gossiping about my marriage. They mingled in the garden, holding crystal flutes, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath them was bought with stolen pension funds. At the center of it all stood the happy couple. Marcus looked like a conquering emperor in a bespoke tuxedo that probably cost more than my father's car. Beside him, Chloe preened like a queen. She wore a custom lace gown and a necklace of sapphires that glittered violently in the sunlight. My stomach turned as I recognized the stones. I had selected those exact sapphires for an investment portfolio 3 years ago. She was wearing the retirement savings of 3,000 employees around her neck. Security was tighter than a presidential summit. Marcus had hired a private paramilitary firm to patrol the perimeter, explicitly instructing them to keep out the unstable ex-wife. They stood at the iron gates with earpieces and stern faces, checking digital invitations against a strict database. A murmur rippled through the line of guests as a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, polished to a mirror shine, rolled up the driveway. It was not on the manifest of approved vehicles. The car stopped right in front of the main checkpoint. The rear door opened, and I stepped out. I was not the weeping, coffee-stained woman Marcus had seen in his office. I wore a floor-length gown of scarlet silk that clung to my figure like a second skin. My hair was swept back, my makeup flawless. I looked dangerous. The head of security stepped forward immediately, his hand resting on his holster. "Ma'am, you are not on the list," he stated, his voice flat. "And Mr. Sterling has issued a specific barring order for you. Leave now, or we will physically remove you." Before he could grab my arm. The other rear door opened. Grandpa Silas stepped out. He did not look like a nursing home resident. He wore a midnight blue Italian suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He leaned on a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, but he did not use it for support. He carried it like a scepter. The aura of command radiating from him was so intense that the security guard actually took a step back. "Check again." "Son," Silas rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. The guard blinked, clearly confused by the old man's presence. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but the name is Silas Vance," he interrupted, holding out a gold-embossed invitation. "And this is my +1. The guard scanned the QR code on the card. Thanks to Jax's handiwork earlier that morning, the scanner let out a cheerful chime. The screen flashed bright green VIP guests. "Do not detain." I apologize, sir," the guard stammered, looking at his device in disbelief. "The system says you are guests of honor. Please, go right in." We walked past the stunned security team and onto the main lawn. A hush fell over the crowd as we approached the seating area. People whispered behind their hands. They recognized me, but they could not reconcile this vision of power with the stories Marcus had told them about my mental breakdown. And they certainly did not recognize the useless old man Marcus had mocked for years. Silas walked with a predatory grace, nodding coolly to a senator he recognized from his intelligence days. Marcus was laughing with a banking tycoon near the altar when he saw us. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He excused himself and marched toward us, his smile fixed and brittle, his eyes screaming murder. He intercepted us near the aisle, grabbing my elbow with a grip that was painful. "What are you doing here?" he hissed through his teeth, keeping his voice low so the guests would not hear. "I told you, if you came here, I would end you. We are just here to celebrate. Marcus," I said, my voice smooth and loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "It is a lovely ceremony." He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "You think this is a game," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "Get out. Get out now. If you make a scene, I swear to God, Elena, I will kill you right after the cake is cut." I looked him in the eyes, seeing the fear behind the bluster. I gently removed his hand from my arm and smoothed the silk of my dress. "Kill me," I chuckled softly, leaning in to whisper back. "You can try, but I think you should worry more about the wedding video. Just wait and see." I took Silas's arm, and we walked past him to the front row, leaving Marcus standing there, sweating in the cool spring air, wondering which trapdoor was about to open beneath his feet. The ceremony began under a canopy of white orchids imported from Thailand, a display of excess that made my stomach turn. The priest, a man who clearly did not know the groom's history with the 10 Commandments, began to recite the vows. He spoke of faithfulness, honesty, and "till death do us part." Every word felt like a punchline to a joke only I understood. Marcus barely looked at his bride. His eyes kept darting toward the front row where I sat. He was sweating, his knuckles white as he gripped the altar railing. He was waiting for the explosion. He expected me to stand up and scream, to throw a shoe, to be the hysterical woman he had painted me to be in the press. But I did nothing. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, maintaining a calm, pleasant expression. I was the picture of grace. My silence was torturing him more than any scream could. It was the calm before the tsunami, and he could feel the water receding from the shore. Once the hollow vows were exchanged and the polite applause died down, the guests moved to the grand ballroom for the reception. It was a cavernous space filled with crystal chandeliers and round tables laden with gourmet food. Chloe wasted no time in seizing the spotlight. She climbed onto the stage, grabbing the microphone with a manicured hand. "Welcome, everyone," she squealed, the diamonds on her wrist catching the stage lights. "I just want to say how blessed I am. Marcus and it was destiny. True love always finds a way. Doesn't it?" She held up her hand, flashing the massive rock on her finger. "And look at this ring. Marcus said nothing was too good for his queen. It is a symbol of our pure, unbreakable bond." Behind her, a massive projection screen descended from the ceiling. It was currently blank, but everyone knew it was prepped to show a montage of their photoshopped romance. I touched the pearl earring in my left ear. It was actually a receiver. "Jax, give me a status," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "I am parked in the catering van out back." Jax's voice came through, sounding giddy. "I have bypassed the last encryption layer on the audio-visual system. The payload is loaded. You are live in 60 seconds. At the table beside me, Grandpa Silas adjusted his silk tie. He did not look at the stage. Instead, he caught the eye of a waiter standing near the main double doors. He gave a barely perceptible nod. The waiter, a man with a scar on his chin who was definitely not a member of the catering staff, nodded back. He signaled to 3 other servers. Quietly, methodically, they moved into position, standing directly in front of the emergency exits and the main entrance. They crossed their arms. The cage was locked. On stage, Chloe handed the microphone to Marcus. He loosened his bow tie, looking more relaxed now that the ceremony was over and I had not made a scene. He bathed in the adoration of the crowd. "Thank you." "Chloe," Marcus said, his voice booming through the speakers. "You know, building Omnitech was hard, but building a life based on values, that is harder. I stand here today as a man of ethics, a man of vision. I have always believed that if you work hard and tell the truth, you will be rewarded." The hypocrisy was so thick it was suffocating. I could not let him finish that sentence. I stood up. The movement was sharp and sudden. I picked up a silver spoon and tapped it against my crystal champagne flute. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was delicate, yet it sliced through the room like a razor blade. The chatter stopped instantly. The music cut out. Every head turned toward me. Marcus froze on stage, the microphone trembling in his hand. His eyes went wide with panic. "Elena," he warned, his voice amplified by the speakers, sounding shaky. "Sit down. Do not do this." I ignored him. I raised my glass high, the red wine looking like blood in the light. My voice was steady, projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "I want to propose a toast," I said, my smile stretching wide and cold. "To Marcus and Chloe. And most importantly, cheers to the most perfect lie of the century." Marcus's face twisted into a snarl. He pointed a shaking finger at the security team stationed by the walls. "Get her!" he screamed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "Throw her out!" Now, 3 guards lunged toward me. I did not flinch. I did not move. I just looked at Marcus and counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1, click. The entire ballroom plunged into total, pitch-black darkness. The darkness did not last long. A split second later, the massive LED screen behind the stage roared to life, casting a harsh, blinding white light over the terrified crowd. But it was not the romantic montage of sunset walks and holding hands that Chloe had paid thousands for. Instead, my voice filled the room, crystal clear and deafening. But why we were partners. Then, Marcus's voice boomed back, distorted slightly by the quality of the hidden recording, but unmistakably his. "We were never partners. You were a stepping stone. And these investors, the board members, they are sheep. Absolute idiots. I can feed them any garbage about vision and ethics, and they lap it up while I funnel the real profits out the back door." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. I watched Senator Jenkins, who was sitting near the front, turn a shade of purple that clashed violently with the tablecloths. But the show was just beginning. On the screen, the audio waveform was replaced by a complex animated flowchart. It was the data Jax had pulled from the ledger. Bright red lines traced millions of dollars moving from the Omnitech Employee Pension Fund directly into accounts labeled Chloe Miller, Consulting Services. "That is my money," a board member shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. Suddenly, the flashes began, dozens of them. The waiters who had blocked the doors stepped aside to let in a swarm of photographers and journalists. We had tipped them off an hour ago. They rushed in like hungry wolves, lenses zooming in on the horrified faces of the guests and the fraudulent couple on stage. "Turn it off," Marcus screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "Cut the power." Someone cut the power. And now for the encore. I whispered to myself. The screen flickered again. The financial charts vanished, replaced by the grainy black and white footage from the hidden camera in the pool house. It showed Marcus, clear as day, entangled with a woman, but the woman was not Chloe. The camera zoomed in to reveal the face of Jessica, the maid of honor who was currently standing 5 feet away from the groom, holding the bride's bouquet. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Then a shriek pierced the air. You animal," Chloe screamed. She did not cry. She attacked. She lunged at Marcus with the ferocity of a wild cat, her fingernails raking across his face. She tackled him into the wedding cake. Tiers of vanilla sponge and fondant collapsed in a spectacular mess of frosting and violence. Her expensive lace dress ripped audibly as she pummeled him, screaming obscenities that made the priest cross himself. Marcus shoved her off, his face smeared with icing and blood. He scrambled to his feet, looking wild-eyed at the crowd. "It is fake," he bellowed, waving his arms desperately. "It is a deep fake. It is AI. My ex-wife is crazy. She made this up." "This is not fake," a voice thundered, cutting through the hysteria. Grandpa Silas stood up. He did not need a microphone. His voice carried the weight of decades of command. He slammed the tip of his cane onto the floor, a sharp crack that demanded attention. "I am Colonel Silas Vance," he announced, his eyes locking onto Marcus. "And I have come to collect what you stole from my granddaughter." As if on cue, the double doors at the back of the hall burst open with a crash. FBI. Nobody move. A dozen agents in windbreakers swarmed into the room, guns drawn but lowered. The private security team Marcus had hired took one look at the federal badges and immediately backed down, raising their hands. They were mercenaries, not martyrs. Marcus looked from the agents to the angry mob of investors, and finally to me. I raised my glass to him in a mock salute. Panic took over. He spun around and bolted toward the service exit behind the stage, slipping on the smeared cake frosting but regaining his balance. "He is running," someone shouted. He reached the heavy metal door, grasping the handle. He thought he was free, but the door opened from the other side. Sarah, his abused assistant, stood there. She was not crying anymore. She looked at him with cold satisfaction. As Marcus tried to push past her, she stuck out her foot. It was a simple, elegant move. Marcus tripped. He went airborne, crashing face first onto the hard wooden stage with a sickening thud before he could scramble up. Sarah stepped over him, looking down with a sneer. "You are fired," she said. 2 agents were on him in seconds. They hauled him up, twisting his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The ballroom was absolute bedlam. Chloe was being restrained by a female officer while screaming that she was a victim, even as another agent read her rights regarding the money laundering charges. Guests were fleeing through the side exits, desperate to avoid the cameras. The white peacocks outside squawked in alarm. In the center of the hurricane, Silas and I stood untouched. I watched Marcus being dragged away, his tuxedo ruined, his reputation incinerated, and his freedom gone. He locked eyes with me one last time, his expression a mix of terror and confusion. He still could not understand how the girl he broke had become the woman who destroyed him. It was a setup. She planned this. "You have to listen to me." "Please!" Marcus screamed into the floorboards as an agent pressed a knee into his back. His tuxedo was torn, and his face was purple with exertion. He looked around desperately for anyone who would listen, but the guests who had been toasting him 5 minutes ago were now staring with morbid fascination or averting their eyes entirely. The chief of police stepped onto the stage, his voice cutting through the din. "Marcus Sterling, you are under arrest for 18 counts of embezzlement, grand larceny, international money laundering, and tax evasion," the chief announced. He turned to Chloe, who was hyperventilating in the grip of a female officer. "And you, Ms. Miller, are under arrest for conspiracy and aiding a felon. You have the right to remain silent." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut on Chloe's wrists was followed by a stunned silence. That was when Grandpa Silas stepped forward. He walked to the center of the stage, indifferent to the cake frosting smeared on the floor, and tapped the microphone with the silver head of his cane. "Thump, thump. Attention, everyone," Silas said, his voice calm but commanding. He pulled a folded legal document from his inside pocket and held it up. "My team of attorneys has just finished filing an emergency motion with the Supreme Court," Silas explained. "Under the fraud recovery clause of the original marriage contract between Marcus and my granddaughter, any assets acquired through the misuse of her funds are subject to immediate seizure. That means everything Marcus thought he owned is gone. This estate, the Omnitech shares, the offshore accounts, and even the champagne you are currently holding. It all legally belongs to Mrs. Elena Vance, effective immediately." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Marcus stopped struggling. He looked up at me as the agents hauled him to his feet. The arrogance was gone. The rage was gone. All that remained in his eyes was a terrifying realization of total defeat. He looked small. He looked like the fraud he always was. "Elena," he croaked, his voice cracking, I I am sorry. I just stared at him. I did not feel the need to smile or gloat. Goodbye, Marcus, I said softly, as they dragged him out the side door. The very people who had shunned me earlier began to swarm toward us. The senators, the bankers, the socialites, they all suddenly remembered how much they admired me. Elena, darling, a woman who had ignored me for a year, cried out. I always knew something was off about him. We must do lunch, Mrs. Vance, a banker said, extending a sweating hand. About that merger. Perhaps we could discuss terms under your leadership. We would be honored to work with the granddaughter of Colonel Vance. Silas stepped in front of me, shielding me from their hypocrisy. My granddaughter will be taking a sabbatical to restructure her assets, Silas said firmly. Call her office in a month. If we are interested, we will let you know. I walked past them, heading toward the exit, but I stopped when I saw Chloe. She was being led away in cuffs, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I signaled for the officer to pause. I walked up to her and took her left hand. You won't be needing this where you are going, I said. I slid the massive diamond ring off her finger. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. I held the stone up to the light. It was heavy, cold, and beautiful. This was bought with my money. I told her, please. Chloe sobbed. It is all I have. I turned toward a large glass donation bin near the entrance, which had been set up for a charity Marcus was using for a tax write-off. I tossed the ring into the air. It sparkled one last time before landing in the bin with a loud clatter among the dollar bills. Now it is for a good cause, I said. I turned my back on her sobbing and walked out the front doors. Grandpa Silas was waiting for me by the Rolls-Royce. The afternoon sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the long driveway. The air tasted fresh, clean, and free of lies. I took my grandfather's arm. I was not the victim anymore. I was not the scorned ex-wife. I was Elena Vance, and I had a company to rebuild, ready to go. Colonel, I asked. Ready when you are. CEO. Silas winked. We got into the car and drove away, leaving the ruins of the wedding behind us, ready to build an empire that was truly mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from so we can share our thoughts together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.